This is the second week, second portion of this assignment, the second walkthrough. We did a two-part course all the way to the course out, and basically, like, I followed suit the same way I did last week. I soloed the kicks, the MIDI and the live kicks. Found out they didn't sync up as much as I wanted to. I went ahead. I used Beat Detective, so I came up here, Beat Detective, analyzed, everything that was going on with the kick track. Captured the selection, separated it, conformed it to the grid, placed my fades, all that stuff, and did the same thing for the snare top and the bottom. I did those separately, soloed with the snare MIDI track, and went through that same process. I did the hats by themselves, and I conformed it to the grid, and it all lined up with the kick, snare, all that. So basically, I've got MIDI conformed to the grid, which is the truest beat, and then I have the snare, kick, and the hats there. So basically, from there, now I have a guide to come back down here and make sure everything's quantized right. Well, this time, as opposed to last week, everything quantized nice and easy. This time is a little different. So I went ahead and I quantized the overheads and the room tracks, and because I had a feeling something was gonna go a little funny, I decided to solo the overhead tracks uh, by themselves with the rest of the mix here. Well, at least the kick, snare, top, bottom, hat, all that stuff. And basically, found a couple places out of sync. Then I soloed all of them. The rooms, the overheads, everything, and everything sounded like a mess. Like there was like a couple parts, like maybe halfway through this thing, where everything just kind of just got out of sync. It sounded really messy. So I needed to find out what the culprit was. So basically, like, I muted, maybe the room and let the overheads ring through to find out if that was what it was. And it was. That was one of them. So basically, I found one of them, and then I unmuted these and I muted the overhead tracks to find out that the room tracks were also the culprit. So what I ended up having to do was I ended up having to move these tracks over to the left or the right. Okay, so here we are. So I had ended up taking, like, these three and shifting them over to the left or to the right. And then I had to take these two and shift them over to the left or the right. And, everything sounded great for a little while. And then it started getting out of sync again. So basically, like, I had to find exactly where it started messing up. And I went in and I started using the warp mode. But here is an instance where I cut it. You know what I mean? Because there's a thing about the warp mode. I didn't want to overly abuse it. You know what I mean? Because when you're messing with warp mode, you're kind of messing with the integrity of the sound and all that stuff. Like, if you're stretching it, you're changing the character of it. So basically, I went ahead and I made some cuts and I made my adjustments just to kind of keep it in sync, keep it flowing. And there were times, though, like, that I would run into where the kick, like, for instance, a kick would be, if this is this isn't the kick, right? Well, it is, but because that's where the break is at. But um, say this was the kick, right? There was an instance where, the room track, the kick would be over here. This transient would be all the way over here. And this transient would be back here. So what I ended up doing, I would warp it to kind of fit, you know what I mean? But I used it, like I said, I used it sparingly, you know what I mean? Because there were some big portions, like, maybe like 3 bars that were like in sync, 3 or 4 bars that were like in sync. And then I would have to go in and just adjust it a little bit. You know what I mean? So I would cut it, adjust it, like here. I'd cut it, I would adjust it, make it all line up with the kick, snare, top and bottom, and the hat, because that's what I committed to the grid. And everything seemed to sync up nicely. So in the end, I achieved some pretty satisfying results. So if that helps, I hope it does. For those of you that might be struggling with this, for those of you that got it down pat, and if you have anything to like add on to maybe some things that I missed, or maybe you found something that sounds better, let me know. Hit me up. You know how to get a hold of me. So that concludes this session and walkthrough. Till next time.